Hello there, men, and welcome to the Masculinism Movement channel, a place for men to be men and talk about masculinity and men's issues. I'm your host, Brian Crawl, and today I think we need to talk a little about female fertility and the truth about female fertility that most people don't know. Up until Roe v. Wade was appealed, women were getting abortions as a form of contraception, which they do because they are underestimating their own body and their fertility window. Many women think they may be able to have kids whenever they want to, but unfortunately, this is far from the truth. A 2011 survey linked below finds a big disconnect when it comes to fertility and what women expect from their bodies versus the reality of them. So because of this, more women are waiting longer to have children than they ever have before, and in many cases, never having them because of that. You see, according to this survey, many women think that a 30-year-old woman has up to an 80% chance of getting pregnant on just one try, while in reality, it is less than 30. Now, for a 40-year-old woman, many women assume up to a 40% success rate when it is actually less than 10. Think about that. Less than 10%. And many women surveyed think that pregnancy will occur much more quickly than it actually will. Getting pregnant is actually very difficult. It goes against the odds. And there's only a minute chance of it happening each time that you have sex, even if you are at your most fertile. In order to get pregnant, you need to be having sex consistently, which means that you need to be in a good sexual relationship. Even then, it could take months or often years. And many women don't realize that. And also, many women don't realize that a large amount of pregnancies are actually lost in the first trimester, and that you will have to keep trying again, and oftentimes again and again and again through multiple different miscarriages, as my father did with his girlfriend that he had after he left my mother. And after half a dozen miscarriages, she decided to stop trying and just figured that she was no longer fertile because she had waited until she was in her 40s. And many women underestimate how successful fertility treatments are as well, and probably do not realize that each round costs tens of thousands of dollars and is not covered by insurance. Many women also seem to overestimate how easy it is to find a good man to partner with. They get a lot of sexual attention from men in their teens and 20s and even their early 30s oftentimes, and they assume that just because they haven't had a whole lot of trouble getting sex from men, that reproducing should be no problem either. But nothing could be further from the truth. Just getting male sexual attention doesn't mean that any one of these men giving you said attention are relationship material or even want a relationship with you, or are even able to reproduce with you, since the man has to be fertile and ideally willing, though women have shown that they don't always consider that to be necessary. But the bottom line is that women need a man to reproduce with. And that means having a man who you have a steady, ongoing partnership with so that you can keep trying for months or years with him and then spend the years that it is going to take raising a child together. But because of all the sexual attention that women get, and because, getting sex for them is relatively easy, for the same reason, women seem to overestimate how easy it will be to get into a relationship and settle down, which is a prerequisite for starting a family. And finding the right guy to do that with takes years, at least a couple. And once you have found the right guy, you're going to need to date for at least a year, more likely 2, before the relationship is solidified enough to think about starting a family. Usually, though, in that first 2 years, the relationship will not end up working out, and you're going to go back to dating and looking for Mr. Right, which again will take at least a couple more years. And then again, it'll take another year or 2 of dating him to form a solid enough relationship or realize that he isn't the one. Most people have to repeat this cycle multiple times before finding the one. So a woman who waits until her 30s to get serious about dating and having a relationship so she can start a family is doing this at the time when she's technically going over the hill, so to speak. Or as we men put it, she has hit the wall in that her physical appearance is no longer going to be progressing and getting better. She's no longer moving forward in her physical youth and beauty. Thus, she's less desirable to men in general at that time. And most of the men in her age group who are relationship material will have already been taken. So it will take longer to date at that age and develop a relationship. It takes longer and is more and more difficult, and you have less options the older you get, especially for women. So the hard truth is that a woman who waits to her 30s to look for the one is probably not going to find him until she's around the age of 40 at least. That is assuming that she is putting in the time to really look, which most women don't. Then she'll have to put in a couple more years of developing the relationship, as I said, and getting into the right place to start a family. At that point, she'll be in her mid-40s or maybe older, and she will have much less than a 10% chance at getting pregnant, as I said, even with fertility treatments, if her and her man can't even afford them. And as for women who wait until their late 30s or older to begin this process, unfortunately, they're for the most part out of luck. This is why women used to start this process when they were in high school, so that they could be married to the right guy and starting a family by their mid-20s when they were still fertile enough to do so. Or at the very least, they would begin right after high school so that they could settle down and start a family by their late 20s. But these days, women want to go to college and work on their career path and spend their 20s and early 30s being strong, independent women who don't take dating and men seriously and just use them to have fun. And wait until they're facing their mid or late 30s and that wall to finally decide to get serious about it. And unfortunately, most women who do this don't even have enough fun doing so to justify the fact that they have just sabotaged their future plans for the rest of their lives. Most of these women end up being emotionally and sexually frustrated and lonely, both while having their party phase as well as permanently for the rest of their lives. And the ones who do partner up end up finding themselves often infertile by the time they try to start a family. And just having a child at that point puts an enormous strain on the relationship and will often ruin it. And usually the only way to guarantee starting a family at that point is through adoption, which is what my dad's girlfriend ended up doing, or fertility treatments, which, aren't guaranteed. And both of those options are very expensive, and it's usually the man who has to pick up the bill for that. Adoption costs thousands to tens of thousands of dollars. The total could end up being literally 40 or 50K. Fertility treatments cost tens of thousands per cycle and can end up totaling in the hundreds of thousands, since it usually takes multiple cycles and miscarriages before success. This not only turns sex into a chore, but it puts you into debt, which could be lifelong, as if the cost of raising children wasn't already enough. Hence the strain these things put on a marriage, which, luckily for the woman, she could just get out of and leave the man with the bill, taking the child with her. Once again, the man gets the bad deal. And the deal is already bad enough when you have kids with a woman in this bias system, but it is much worse when you are trying to have kids with a woman who has fertility issues because she waited too long to try and spent her 20s riding the cock carousel. But this isn't just about a woman's ability to have kids. It's also about her ability to have healthy kids. And that goes down with age too. You see, the longer a woman waits to have children, the more likely it is that if she does have a child, that it will have birth defects and abnormalities like Down syndrome. If she waits until her late 30s, the chances of this are almost 50%. If she waits until her mid-40s, it is over 80%. So just think about that. Not only are the woman's chances of having kids getting lower, but if you're trying to have kids with a woman who is in her 40s, there's a very good chance your child will have Down syndrome or some other genetic defect. This is a very dark reality that feminism is ignoring and most women do not realize. So if you are a man watching this and you have a significant other in your life who's in her 30s or 40s and wants kids, beware, as this is a very bad investment that could very well bankrupt you. And as for any young women listening to this, if you ever want a family, you should have kids sooner rather than later. Don't waste your best years getting drunk and having one-night stands if you ever want to get married and start a family. Start thinking about these things sooner rather than later before it gets too late. For a man, doing so with a woman is not something I actually recommend because of how I mentioned, that a man can invest all this time, energy, and money trying to build a family with a woman, and she could just take it all away from him. So as a man, if you want to have kids, I recommend doing so on your own with a test tube baby, which you don't need a woman for. And that is one of the big differences between female fertility and male fertility, is that female fertility not only has a window which will close sooner rather than later, but they also need a man for it. Men are always fertile, and we can have kids on our own. So that is the truth about female fertility, and that concludes this talk. I hope I mansplained that well enough for you guys out there. Thanks for listening. Be sure to share your own thoughts and opinions by commenting below. And if you like this video, be sure to hit the like button and share these messages with everyone by sharing the video on social media and talking about these things too. And lastly, check out the links in the description below for other resources for your masculine personal development and living the life you want to as an independent man. And if you can afford to donate, please do so with the PayPal link below, because your support funds me doing this work and fighting the good fight for men like you. And you can stay tuned for the next video coming out soon, which, speaking of fertility, will be on the question, why have children? And make sure you subscribe so you'll be notified when that is. And until then, take care of yourselves, men, because no woman out there is going to.